Let me first ask about your take on the importance of the Strait of Hormuz. There was a time when analysts would tell us if that closed, we would see total catastrophe in the energy markets, and that just doesn't happen. Is it maybe less important than we thought to begin with?
Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. Actually, no, it's extremely important. The way that we have been losing so much barrels of oil and natural gas from the markets, it's kind of tremendous. The way that it hasn't really been a catastrophe so far is the fact that we have been using a lot of the inventory. So that's going to run out pretty soon. So, it's just a matter of time where we see a big, big depletion of the global reserves of oil and natural gas. From what it seems.
So my kind of optimistic assessment was that maybe investors and industries were finding alternate routes, and you operate some of those alternate routes. So have you seen increased demand for other routes as people can't use the Strait of Hormuz?
Well, there are certain aspects of the energy market that are kind of irreplaceable. You cannot replace oil from a number of, the petrochemical industry or jet fuel or things that are pretty important, very important in our daily lives. So that goes without saying that it's kind of irreplaceable. There are, of course, alternative routes. The U.S. has come in to, pick up the slack in a number of ways of the global oil demand, but this is not close to being enough from what it seems for this year. So we're still eating a lot of the reserves. And of course, longer distances means longer ton miles, more ton miles, and that makes freight to be more expensive for everybody, and most importantly for the consumer, the end consumer paying for everything.
What about the coal shipments, the stronger coal shipments headed to Asia? Is that a temporary energy security trade due to the closure of the strait, or is that a longer-term reality for coal and for Asian economies?
Well, there's a number of power plants in the Far East that are being fueled by coal, and there's more and more of them being built as we speak. So the recent crisis in the Hormuz and the Persian Gulf is just another giant alarm bell that the world should not be so much reliant on oil, to the extent possible, of course. So coal is becoming dominant again for two reasons. Number one, we are replacing the current energy required, for day-to-day lives, especially in the Far East. China has been restocking massive amounts of coal in the recent months, and most importantly, coal is also becoming a strategic commodity for the United States. You are exporting more and more quantities of coal to the west coast of India and a number of other places in the world. So coal, I'm not saying it's going to become dominant over the period of the next 10 years, but it certainly in the short term is becoming quite important in the energy market.
I think about energy, and we talk about energy so much when it comes to the big data center build out, the AI infrastructure. You point out, though, Stamatis, that it's also steel, aluminum, iron ore, bauxite, that's needed for putting up data centers, for grid improvements, obviously for EVs to build the cars to begin with. Is that visible in the cargo flows today?
Of course. And this is exactly what we do. We transport the world's most important commodities, raw materials for infrastructure. You have trillions of dollars of global infrastructure projects all over the world. You have now the data centers, which also is going to be trillions of dollars of demand for aluminum and steel and all that. So that's what we do. We transport iron ore, bauxite, and coal required in order to produce these super required, commodities for the world growth of tomorrow. So it's not just the energy market. It's, simply all the infrastructure happening around the world, which we kind of been neglecting given all the crises that we have to deal with.
Your diesel prices have, I imagine, risen substantially. Tell us about those costs for you and how well you've been able to pass them on to your clients, your consumers.
Well, as I mentioned before, freight is becoming more and more expensive. So at the end of the day, the consumer is who pays for all this increased costs. So increased bunker fuel for our ships, as well as a massive increase in ton miles that is required to go around all these problematic areas like the Red Sea, like the Persian Gulf and all that, that is an increasing inflationary pressure for the consumers. There's nothing we can do about it. I mean, there's no way that you can cut through, a military or a war zone. So unfortunately, all the ships have to go around certain areas like the Cape of Good Hope and all these other critical areas. So unfortunately, all that is being translated to the end consumer.
You also have a fleet renewal program and you pay a dividend. How do you balance returning cash to shareholders with buying new tonnage before, I guess, the next cycle turns or the war ends?
Well, right now our new building program is close to and exceeding soon $500 million. So we're in the process of renewing our fleet over the course of the next 3-4 years, but still returning capital to our shareholders and generally, dividends and cash back to our shareholders is for us paramount importance. So we will continue doing both, not only replacing our fleet and renewing with high quality assets that will be delivered to us over the next 2 to 3 years, but also we will continue a very strong return to our investors. Something I also wanted to mention about before, which is again close to the energy markets, it's the El Nino effect. Don't forget that 2026 forecasters believe there's going to be an 80% chance of El Nino. And that means that there's going to be a very increased need for energy happening from the summer months and towards the second half of the year. China, Far East, Japan, all together, and Korea will be in massive needs of energy, and that cannot come from oil and natural gas being trapped in the Persian Gulf. We're talking about massive amounts of coal happening in the next few months as well.